A panel of hieroglyphs sits on the inner wall of the Osiris shaft at Giza, 14 meters below the surface. The limestone it was cut from has not seen daylight in over 4,000 years. Most tourists never know it exists. Most Egyptologists do not discuss it publicly, and the translation of the central passage on that wall has been read by a small number of scholars over the past 40 years. What they found describes something that should not be there: a chamber, sealed, predating the pharaohs, containing objects the Egyptians themselves say they did not make. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority has restricted independent access to the lower levels of the Osiris shaft since 2011. The passage on that wall was noted in internal survey records in 1996. It has not been the subject of a single peer-reviewed publication since. What those hieroglyphs actually describe, when you follow the language where it leads, is a sealed room beneath the Sphinx, a room that ground-penetrating radar has already found, a room that has never been opened, and what the inscription says is inside it does not belong to ancient Egypt. It belongs to something that came before. We are going to decode what the hieroglyphs actually say. We are going to show you what the modern scans found. And we are going to show you exactly why the people who know about this have gone very quiet. Stay with me until the end, because what follows may completely change the way you look at history. The anchor inscription is located in what Egyptologists call the Osiris shaft. It is a multi-level subterranean complex cut directly into the bedrock beneath the Giza plateau. It sits roughly 300 meters southwest of the Sphinx. The shaft descends through 3 distinct levels. The lowest level sits approximately 29 meters below the surface. It contains a sarcophagus, a flooded antechamber, and a carved wall panel on the western face. That panel is formally cataloged in the Cairo Museum Survey Registry under CG 8314. The physical carving remains in situ, underground, in restricted access territory. It is hieroglyphic, formal register, consistent with late Old Kingdom or early Middle Kingdom scribal convention. It was partially documented by the Egyptian archaeologist Salim Hassan during his Giza excavations in the 1930s. Hassan described the lower shaft as the most remarkable of all things found at Giza. He published almost nothing about the western wall panels specifically. His excavation notes referencing that panel were not included in the published volumes of his Giza survey series. They remain in manuscript form, held at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, and have not been digitized or made publicly available. The scholar John Anthony West reviewed portions of those notes in the 1990s and described the omission as deliberate. That is where this begins. Now, I want to be clear about something before we go further. This is not fringe theorizing. This is not someone looking at a blurry photograph and seeing what they want to see. The inscription exists, the catalog number is real, the restriction on access is real, the radar anomaly beneath the Sphinx is real. It has been confirmed by more than one independent scientific team using different equipment and different methodologies. The problem is not whether these things exist, the problem is what they point to when you line them up together. That is what nobody wants to discuss out loud. The inscription begins with a phrase the standard translation renders as the house of the first time. In Egyptian, the phrase is "Huat Spaipi." Egyptologists have treated this as a ritual reference to the moment of creation in Egyptian mythology, a poetic phrase, a theological concept. But here is what the standard translation leaves out. The glyph marker attached to the word Huat, the word for house, is the marker for physical, built structures, not abstract concepts, not mythological spaces, built rooms, enclosed spaces with walls and a floor and a ceiling. When that marker appears on the word hut in other Old Kingdom texts, it always refers to a real building, a real place you could walk into. The phrase is not the mythological concept of the first time, it is the built structure from the first time. That is a different statement entirely. What follows on the second register of the panel is stranger. A sequence of glyphs follows. Translators render it as the knowledge of those who came before the flood. Standard Egyptological interpretation calls this a reference to mythological ancestors, gods of the Ennead, pre-dynastic spirits, ritual language. But look at the specific word used for knowledge here. The root is ra. It means to know in the sense of technical mastery, practical skill, not spiritual wisdom, not divine revelation. The same root is used in the papyrus Anastasi, that is catalog number EA10394 in the British Museum. It is used there to describe the technical knowledge of master builders, architects, engineers, not priests, not gods, people who knew how to construct things. The inscription does not describe wisdom, it describes technical skills, skills of the builders who came before the flood. That distinction matters. That is a completely different claim. And when it appears in this location, on this wall, in this shaft cut beneath the Giza plateau, it is describing something specific, a repository of that technical knowledge, a place where it was stored. The third element is the one nobody quotes. At the bottom of the western wall panel, partially damaged but still legible, is a directional marker. It is not pointing up toward the sky as most divine or celestial references do in Egyptian texts. It is pointing laterally, horizontally, toward the northeast. The northeast from the Osiris shaft at the coordinates where it sits points directly beneath the body of the Sphinx. Not near the Sphinx, not toward the Sphinx, beneath it. The inscription is not describing a metaphysical journey. It is describing a physical direction, and at the end of that direction, the glyph used appears in the pyramid text of Unas. Those are the oldest religious texts in the world, carved in the burial chamber of Unas at Saqqara around 2375 BCE. In that context, the glyph means a sealed room containing objects placed there for preservation. Not a tomb, not a burial, a storage room, a vault. The inscription on the western wall of the Osiris shaft is describing a sealed vault positioned to the northeast beneath the Sphinx, containing objects preserved from before the dynastic period. That is what it says. Read in sequence, with the grammatical markers intact, that is the only coherent translation. Here is where it gets disturbing, because what the inscription describes, a sealed underground vault to the northeast beneath the Sphinx, is exactly what modern scanning technology has found. In 1992, the geologist Thomas Dobecki conducted a ground-penetrating radar survey of the Sphinx enclosure. Dobecki was working alongside John Anthony West as part of an independent geological investigation. The radar identified a rectangular cavity beneath the left paw of the Sphinx. Rectangular, not a natural void, not a crack in the bedrock. A shaped, enclosed space with right-angled walls. Dobecki's survey showed the cavity measuring approximately 9 meters by 12 meters, at a depth of around 5 meters below the current surface. Dobecki published these findings. The shape was not ambiguous. 9 meters by 12 meters, right angles, a room. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority refused to grant follow-up excavation access. No drill, no borehole, no second survey. The cavity has not been investigated since. That was over 30 years ago. In 2015, a Japanese team from Tohoku University conducted an electromagnetic survey of the Sphinx Plateau. The lead researcher was Hirokatsu Watanabe. His team used ground-penetrating radar equipments, significantly more advanced than what Dobecki used in 1992. The results were striking. Watanabe's team identified not one but 3 subsurface anomalies beneath and around the Sphinx body. One of those anomalies matched the rectangular cavity Dobecki found in exactly the same location. The other 2 were new, additional enclosed spaces, one of them significantly larger, extending beneath the haunches of the Sphinx toward the northeast, toward the Osiris shaft. The team submitted a formal request to the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities for permission to drill survey boreholes into the anomaly zones. The request was denied. Watanabe's Egyptian survey data was not published in any peer-reviewed Egyptology journal. The results exist in the technical records of the survey itself and in reports circulated through geological academic networks. The denial was absolute. No explanation was given beyond administrative review pending. That review has been pending for over a decade. 2 separate scientific teams, 2 different radar technologies, 30 years apart, both found the same thing. A sealed rectangular chamber beneath the Sphinx. One team was denied access in 1992, the other was denied access in 2015. The chamber is still there, still sealed, still unexamined. And the hieroglyphs on the western wall of the Osiris shaft, carved 4,500 years ago, already knew it was there. The suppression of this information follows a pattern that goes back much further than either of those access denials. It begins with the Egyptians themselves, around 1336 BCE, when the pharaoh Akhenaten died. The priests of Amun launched a systematic campaign to erase him from history. Every carved oval ring bearing his name was chiseled from every monument in Egypt, every stela, every temple wall, every administrative record they could reach. Historians call this the damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. But what most accounts of this erasure miss is this. Several of the inscriptions chiseled out during the Amun restoration were not Akhenaten's personal religious texts. They were references to pre-dynastic knowledge repositories, inscriptions that pointed backward in time, to what the Egyptians called the time of the Necheru, the time of the divine ones who built the first structures. Those references were removed along with Akhenaten's name. The erasure was not purely theological. Something specific about what those inscriptions referenced made the priests of Amun want them gone. In 391 CE, the Serapeum at Alexandria was destroyed by order of Theophilus, the Coptic Christian bishop of Alexandria. He had the sanction of the emperor Theodosius. This was not the famous Library of Alexandria. This was a separate institution, an annex of the broader knowledge complex, housing tens of thousands of administrative scrolls and technical documents. Among those documents were records Ammianus Marcellinus described as the plans of the structures before memory. He was writing in the same century the building burned. Two separate ancient writers used that exact phrase, the plans of the structures before memory. Not myth, not allegory. Physical documents with physical dimensions. After 391 CE, those documents no longer existed. In 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign produced what became known as the Description de l'Égypte, 23 volumes. The published volumes are real and accessible, but researchers including the Egyptologist Andrew Collins, who worked through the expedition's unpublished manuscript archive in Paris, documented a significant discrepancy. The working field notes from the Giza Plateau, particularly those concerning subsurface measurements and shaft systems, contain observations not included in the final published volumes. Those manuscript field notes are held in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Access requires institutional approval and a specific research purpose. They have never been digitized. The gap between what the expedition recorded on the ground and what eventually reached the printed page has never been formally explained. And then there is Zahi Hawass. From 2002 until 2011, Hawass served as Secretary General of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities. During that period, he held effective personal authority over who was permitted to excavate, scan, or conduct independent research at Giza. In 2009, a consortium of researchers from Florida State University applied for permission to conduct a new ground-penetrating radar survey of the Sphinx enclosure. They were specifically targeting the subsurface anomalies, first identified by Dobeke in 1992. Hawass denied the application. In his public statement on the matter, he said there was no evidence of any chamber beneath the Sphinx and that the matter was settled. He said this in the same year that Watanabe's Japanese team was compiling data showing a matched anomaly in precisely that location. Hawass left his position in 2011 during the Egyptian Revolution. The application was never revisited. The permits were never granted. The most direct failed attempt belongs to John Anthony West and Robert Skoke. West spent decades arguing that the Sphinx was far older than the official dating of around 2500 BCE. The weathering patterns on the enclosure walls were his evidence. In 1990, he brought in Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University, to conduct a formal analysis. Schoch confirmed it. The erosion on the enclosure walls was water-based, caused by prolonged heavy rainfall. The last time the Giza Plateau received that kind of sustained rainfall was before 10,000 BCE. That made the Sphinx, by the geological evidence of its own weathering, at least 12,000 years old. Schoch presented this finding at the Geological Society of America's annual conference in 1991. It won the award for Best Presentation in Paleoclimatology for that session. Mainstream Egyptologists refused to engage with the geological evidence. Hawass publicly dismissed it without offering any counter-analysis. West applied for an independent excavation permit to investigate the subsurface anomaly beneath the Sphinx paw. The anomaly Dobeki had already confirmed was there. That application was denied every single time he submitted it. He submitted 4 separate applications between 1993 and 2008. Every one was rejected. West died in 2018. He never received permission to dig. The void was 6 meters down. 2 independent radar surveys had already confirmed it was there. He was never allowed to reach it. Now, let me be direct about one thing. I am not saying what is inside that chamber is alien. I am not saying it requires technology we cannot explain. What I am saying is what the evidence actually shows. The hieroglyphs on the Osiris shaft wall describe a sealed vault containing the technical knowledge of builders who predated dynastic Egypt. 2 radar surveys have confirmed a sealed rectangular chamber in exactly the location the inscription points to. Every serious attempt to investigate that chamber has been blocked, denied, or ignored. Those are the facts. Set them next to each other and decide what they mean. But here is what the inscription itself says about the contents. The glyph cluster on the lower panel uses 3 specific terms for what is stored inside. The first is NFR Dru. It means objects of exceptional quality or craftsmanship. The second is Medjot. That means written records, texts, documents. And the third, the one that stops you cold when you understand what it means in context, is the word Kepesh. In dynastic Egypt, Kepesh is used for tools, working instruments, functional objects designed for a specific task, not ceremonial objects, not ritual items, working tools. The inscription describes a sealed vault containing high-quality working tools and written records, placed there by builders who predated the pharaohs. That is not a mythological statement. That reads exactly like an inventory. Like someone sealed a room, carved what was in it on the nearest available wall, and expected someone to come back and open it. The tools of a civilization we have no name for. The written records of a people whose monuments may still be under our feet. We are reading their inventory right now. We are just not allowed to open the room. What we are confronting here is not a gap in human knowledge. It is a gap that has been actively maintained. The Giza Plateau sits inside one of the most tightly controlled archaeological jurisdictions on the planet. Independent researchers are not permitted to drill, scan, or excavate without Egyptian government approval. That approval for anything touching the Sphinx enclosure has not been granted to any independent team in more than 3 decades. The official position of the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities is that there is nothing beneath the Sphinx requiring further investigation. That position is maintained in the face of 2 separate radar surveys, in the face of a corroborating ancient inscription, in the face of geological evidence that the monument is at least twice as old as the official chronology allows. The position is not based on evidence, it is based on what the evidence would mean if it were followed all the way through. The ancient Egyptians had a name for what they believed sat beneath the Sphinx. They called it the Akhet, the horizon, the place where 2 worlds meet. Some texts call it Isebet and Ra, the hidden room of the first ones. The inscription on the Osiris shaft wall is consistent with both names, and what it says is stored inside that room would not just change Egyptology. The tools, the documents, the technical records of the builders who came before the flood, it would change what we think we know about the timeline of human civilization, about when complex, organized, tool-using societies first appeared on this planet, about what was lost and why, and how deliberately the loss was managed. The chamber beneath the Sphinx is still sealed. The radar returns are still sitting in survey files that nobody in an official position wants to discuss. The inscription on the wall of the Osiris shaft still points northeast. It still uses the word for vault, still uses the word for tools and records, still describes a place put there by people who built things before the pharaohs existed. Millions of people walk across the Giza Plateau every year. They take photographs of the Sphinx. They stand on the ground directly above a rectangular void that science has confirmed and authority has suppressed. Most of them have no idea. The Sphinx looks back at them with the same expression it has held for 12,000 years. Patient, sealed, waiting, and somewhere below their feet is a sealed room. 4,500 years of silence has not erased it. The record of a civilization we have never named is still waiting. The tools are still there. The written records are still there. The inventory carved on the Osiris shaft wall is still accurate. We just have not been allowed to verify it.